Today I want to talk about Naos. Its narrative, highs and lows, and what I think is missing, and generally SOTO and the narrative so far. But first, hey, welcome to my channel. I'm Fornex. Pull up a chair, grab something warm and delicious to drink, and let's dive into it, because it's been a fair old while since I chatted about my thoughts of the writing and the narrative journey and delivery of Guild Wars 2. I do talk about it quite often on the Lightbringers podcast, links below. I'll be there Friday chatting about it on the live stream on Twitch, but I haven't really spoken about it here for a long time, and I want to kind of make a letter to the future, a letter to future expansions, a letter to the community about what I think is missing with the story of Peitha and The Midnight King. And yes, I guess I am missing my thoughts on SOTO. So I really liked it, especially the opening salvo of the expansion with that encounter with Saras in Naos, his predatory presence, the real feeling of danger, the hiding mechanics, ominous, seductive voice whispering throughout most of the expansion, tempting us, warning us, giving us insights into the world. I enjoyed that a lot. I enjoyed playing through the different fractals that the Astral Ward used. I don't think anything could justify their use in a moral context because of the non-intervention policy of Asgaran. If there was ever a time he was going to intercede in what was happening in the world, it would have been us murdering systematically all the dragons and threatening the entire balance of the planet, and he didn't. And therefore, all his little experiments and the messing of people's lives served no purpose other than to offer the environmental team a fantastic opportunity to explore alternative histories, which I'm totally there for. What did work, I think, was Mobam, brilliant, interesting character. Reintroduction of the dwarves, fantastic moments. Leah is great. I hope that we see more of him in the future. One day it would be fantastic to be able to play a dwarf, or a Tengu, or a Kodan in Guild Wars 2 as a box feature. A new race would be a winner for me. Take my money, please. I also liked Asgaran. Asgaran's character was very charismatic. I would have liked it if they'd hidden that he was a seer from the start, so that when we meet him, we had that moment where we're like, oh my god, rather than knowing right from the start. I would have liked there to have been some more secrets in Secrets of the Obscure, akin to the reveal of Ito Demerzel in the Foundation series. If you haven't read them, I highly recommend it. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I wish there were more options to not trust Peitha in conversational mechanics, because I did not and do not. But yeah, I enjoyed overall the environmental art and the environmental storytelling, the new mechanics, the new characters of SOTO. The main bulk of the narrative in the opening salvo of the expansion, I loved. However, I will say that a lot of our expansions, new adventures, begin with a letter or some sort of comms communication, and I would like to see the end of that. When you have messages from friends, that can be fun. It doesn't matter if it's digital or a real pen pal. That's fantastic. I love that. But as a narrative device, it's kind of tired at this point, guys. I love you, but please can we have some sort of exciting, cinematic, inciting incident, please? Also, side point, I think that they did the whole expansion welcome to SOTO in the wrong place. The place that they should have put that is when Saras entered the first time when we were in Naos. Welcome to the expansion, Cower Mortals. That would have been perfect. But those are the only nits I'm going to be picking for SOTO. The rest is an enjoyable expansion. And if that was all the expansion I got for my $25, I would have been exceedingly happy. Money well spent. A huge amount of bang for your buck. And then we got to Naos. So, hear me out. Naos is a beautiful, grim fairy tales world. The maps are great. They show a ruined civilization. They have interesting events happening. Mini metas have been interesting. They're very replayable. The loot is good. The narratives that are happening on the map are fun and quirky. If you haven't seen the Inside Out Quagons, they are weird and awesome. There's lots of tentacles. It's a fun experience. What I will say, however, in terms of narrative, there is a disconnect between the story that is happening on the maps and the naming conventions of the maps, and story that is happening for us playing through its narrative arc. Peitha is a character in the main story. She is an antagonist to Peitha and our character. We killed Saras with Peitha. Peitha was Saras's mate. And she has an entire area. She is one of the liege lords of the Midnight King's court. She has dominion over this section of the map. And not once on the map do we encounter Peitha. Not once. She is not a looming presence. There is no additional narrative. So the only time that we hear about her is in a couple of conversations, and the only time we meet her is when we kill her in the final salvo of part 1 of the story of Naos. And to me, that seems an incredible missed opportunity. I understand that because of the reduced cost of the expansion and because of the reduced timescale that expansions are being released on, there is an economy of narrative that is happening. And that is fair. As I said before, I feel like we've got enough bang for our buck with the main story of Secrets of the Obscure without Naos. But because they advertise this as a whole separate narrative, I don't think that they're delivering that. In the interactions and character development that we've gotten, there have been some interesting characters introduced, for sure. Peitha being potentially one of them, but we never get to really meet her. She doesn't have any impact on the story. Her death doesn't seem to have much of an effect on anything because they are not utilizing the assets that they have, I think, effectively to tell the story. I feel like there is a disconnect between the event team and the narrative team. You could have probably all the same events with narrative elements woven into it with characters from the main story arc. Peitha could have been a looming menace. Her wrath, her rage, the feeling of betrayal that she justifiably has towards Peitha could have been the tip of the spear, the axis mundi around which the narrative of this map spun. I think that there should have been and needs to be, with this economy of scale, supporting narrative content happening on the map to shore up, fill in the gaps and flesh out the story. Because I feel like the concepts and ideas with Naos and the Cryptus and the Midnight King are amazing. The concepts are a mile wide, but unfortunately they are being delivered an inch deep. We are just skirting on the surface of this fantastically narrative-rich world that the writers have built, but we never get to dive in. We have the Clip Notes version of the story. We have the synopsis rather than the experience. And it is not necessarily, for me at least, endearing Peitha to us. Any of the actions that have happened on the map have not made me any more supportive of her. I've always felt like a victim of her manipulation rather than a person that is allied with her out of anything other than necessity. And this paradigm, this lack of cohesion, disconnect between narrative and map, continues in part 2 of the Naos story arc. We have 2 new vital characters introduced, Queen Labrys and General Nefus. And here is where I would say that a couple of good, well thought out, well executed cutscenes could have filled in the gaps. We are told that General Nefus is a great leader and tactician, respected by the Cryptus. So much so that respect has offered him a shield from the Midnight Kings, from Eparch's vengeance, who would likely taken Nefus off the board to ensure that his rule was unchallenged. But instead of showing us through cutscenes, or us experiencing a battle at his side so that he can show his prowess and his command of tactics and the reverence with which his troops hold him, we are simply told this, rather than making this evoking and immersive for the player. It is just dialogue. And then we have Queen Labrys, her great entrance with all her guards who look indistinguishable from Nefus. That doesn't help, but there's no grand entrance, no grand cutscene. Even in-game, the character models of Peitha and Nephis and Labrys just stand there and narrate. They're not looking at each other, there's no interaction. The great voice acting that we get, which is fantastic. And this is the truth right through Naos. The lines are delivered wonderfully by the voice actors that they have, but they are failed by the fact that there is no machinima. There is no acting in character in-game, be it in the open world as them emoting and interacting with one another. They can be halfway across the map talking to each other as if they're face to face. At one point, Peitha is talking to the general and she is stuck in one corner, not even facing him. It's incredibly jarring. Writers try to create what is known as a fictive dream, where the reader, where the consumer of the content is so in it that they lose themselves in the narrative. And every opportunity that they've had to do that, they have not taken it up. Even to the point where we have the antagonist of SOTO, Eparch. He has tormented and loomed over the entirety of the story arc. And his entrance into the world is lackluster, to say the least. There should have been a grand entrance. There should have been a cutscene. He should have landed and Palawa Joko style lorded it over all of us. The death of the queen should have been a deep and emotive moment. These characters should have been animated appropriately to demonstrate the gravitas of the situation, and yet Naos and the cryptids in general, to me, feel like a missed opportunity to have a fully realized story delivered to the players through meaningful gameplay in open world and beautifully rendered cutscenes in our solo story instances that are, for the people who are not interested in the story, skippable. Now, I understand that long cutscenes are not everyone's cup of tea, but if you care about the story and the world building of your massively multiplayer role-playing game, then you need to give the players the emotional hooks in order to be invested in it. You have to give them intrinsic reasons to play, and caring about the characters and what happens to them and caring about the evolution of the world. These are all intrinsic reasons to play, and I feel that that's what's missing. I feel like we didn't get as many cutscenes and narrative moments as I would have liked throughout SOTO generally, but is palpably absent in Naos. My hope is with the finale of the Naos story arc, of possibly Peitha's story arc, is that they have a very strong finish. That they give Eparch the depth and scale and scope that he deserves as a character. That they give Peitha a fitting conclusion to her story, or perhaps the conclusion to this first story that we have with her. Perhaps she will be and lead and be a major part of the narrative of Guild Wars going forward. I would be very open to that. I think she is a worthy, charismatic anti-hero that I would love to see continue. But I feel like they have to have a big finish. And I also feel like for the next expansion that they have to frame the bridging content that would have been the living world content in between expansions. They have to frame that as not a separate, entire, unique story arc, and just almost like the epilogue to the main expansion. I feel like that's a more appropriate framing for the content that we've gotten. But again, I reiterate, it's not that I don't think we've had enough bang for our buck. It's not that I don't think that SOTO hasn't been a success, a roaring success, a fantastic expansion. I think they should have a dedicated machinima team who gives the characters, the world, these extraordinary events that are happening, the pomp and circumstance that they deserve. And we deserve as players. This is our world. We love it. We want to see the stories brought to life. And I just think they're not living up to their potential in this area. So in conclusion, the maps, the scope and scale are great, but the delivery has stumbled. The lack of character depth with the antagonistic characters specifically is just not enough to warrant the status that they seem to be given. I think the story is only as good as the antagonist or the threat that you overcome. And with the dragons, they had a built-in mythic, epic enemy to thwart. But in these more narrative-focused and driven stories, they need to give time for the player to really connect with these new characters, to love them, to hate them. They should be a looming figure in the story. It's something that World of Warcraft did very well. With Wrath of the Lich King, arguably one of the best narrative experiences that Warcraft ever produced. From the very start of the expansion, the antagonist was Arthas, and he loomed over everything. He was omnipresent, and by the end of it, you wanted to kill him. He had done so many bad things with a song in his heart and a skip in his step, and you wanted him to die. And that narrative peak was so much higher because of the emotional investment of me. I wanted to kill him. And I haven't had that with Eparch. He is kind of like a voice in our heads taunting us, but really the bad guy needs as much showtime as the hero. So that's my thoughts on why Naos narratively doesn't seem to be working, and kind of some hopes and general critiques and wish list for future expansions. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please do like, subscribe, and stick around for more content in the future. If you haven't jumped into Guild Wars 2 already and you're listening to my video, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. There are referral links down there in the description for purchasing the expansion or for diving into the free-to-play game. Using any of the referral links directly supports my channel because you not a penny more, and for the free-to-play game, not a penny at all. Thanks to the generosity of ArenaNet and their partner program, of whom I am a proud affiliate, although you can tell my opinions are my own. And please do show some love to my fantabulous patrons, supporters over on Subscribestar and Patreon. They give their real life money to keep this show up running and me more or less sane. I can't do it without them. Come join me on my private patron Discord, my patron parlor, where I post all sorts of stuff, and I'm always there to have a chat with my supporters. Links below. But we have come to the very end. So until we meet again, please stay safe, stay awesome, and thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.